Hi, I'm Dean Perrine, Executive Vice President at JSA, and on behalf of NetSapiens, I'd like to welcome the NetSapiens CEO himself, my longtime friend, Mr. Anand Bush. Anand, is always a pleasure to speak with you and to see you even virtually. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. I appreciate it.
It's good to see you again, Dean, and good to see you up and about. I know you've had you yourself have had the challenge with COVID like so many other people. So I'm glad to see that you're doing well and healthy.
Thank you, Ananya. I feel like I am one of the fortunate ones, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But Anand, let's go ahead and jump right in. You have hit some very significant milestones over the last 13, 14 months, over the during the course of the pandemic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about those milestones and, as
Sure.
importantly, some of the pivots maybe that you had to make at the beginning of 2020?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. I just got done writing a letter to our client community. Some of the things that I spoke to there, I'm happy to share kind of briefly with you as well, is, it's kind of a humbling 2020. On one side, we were dealing with a major pandemic and pivots, as you've mentioned, to figure out, okay, what are we going to do to act, react, perform with the things in front of us. But at the same time, the world almost pivoted to looking at remote work and technologies like ours. They became, in essence, day-to-day needs for business survival, and so that really put what we're doing into the forefront. That pushed our vision forward. Really just forced us to really act on our mission. And some of the biggest accomplishments were really being able to act and perform, pivot, provide collaborative tools. Snap HD was a big release for us in our V41. We had to get that out a lot faster than that we anticipated, but we were able to do that successfully. We had to work with our clients, if you will, to figure out the best kind of economic flexibility that we could provide them, so that they could continue to survive. And the biggest thing to be proud of is, like I said, the whole team kind of rallied, changing our day-to-day work style and what we had to do. But we were able to continue to push some major milestones. We crossed 1.6 million seats at the end of the year. Right, we'll be crossing 1.7 here pretty shortly. So that was a big accomplishment. Continue to see growth in the marketplace that way, and then we continue to invest in the team and continue to expand outside of the United States as well.
Yeah, and fortunately, I had the luxury of getting to read that client communication that you put out just this morning. And in that, you talked about hindsight and foresight, and that really resonated with me. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what you meant by like having that hindsight at the beginning of the year, and the foresight that ultimately it gave you as you move forward.
Well, I mean, two things, right? I mean, I think the foresight piece really comes from that notion of just accelerating what we can do with technology today, right? What can be done to improve everybody's day-to-day professional and personal lives with respect to technology, and how that can continue progressing, right? And the reality is that a lot of us in the industry have been working on this for quite some time. Now this became a big wake-up call to really start saying, okay, this is very real, because there was a very real aspect of using that technology from a day-to-day perspective. It wasn't an early adopter thing anymore, so on and so forth. Now, that's kind of the look into the future. The hindsight piece in one aspect is, gosh, there's a lot of things that if we put our minds to them, we should be getting to them now, right? That's what we learned. There are certain things that we need to prioritize and, understand what we believe is important. You can't fight physics. You have a certain amount of time in the day. And so it's really important to find that clarity on, what are the important things that you need to work on. And so, I think that's the combination of kind of hindsight and foresight that all came together again, both personally and professionally.
Anon, yeah, excellent. And again, that email was so eloquent. I appreciate your sending that to me. But let's talk about the clarity that you're talking about. How does that clarity bring NetSapiens into 2021? What pivots that you may have made then, or a year ago, are you bringing forward in 2021? Can you expand on that a little?
Yeah, so a few things, right? I mean, I think there's some really key elements to scale, right? I think again in my review to clients, I spoke to the notion that we're competing, and we've and you'll see this hopefully in short order here, is that we're on the radar now with respect to some of the biggest players in the marketplace. And so what we have to do is we have to continue to scale. We have to continue to get better. We have to continue to, practice what we preach from an operational perspective. So there's things that we have to do both internally as an organization to promote that scale, right? Breaking silos within departments. Even though we're a small organization, we have to be more efficient because we're much smaller than, the guys that you'll see that are kind of above us. Yeah. In the markets. I mean, these guys are behemoths, and they can literally throw massive resources to solve problems. And while, financially we may not be able to compete with them, from a product perspective, from a marketplace perspective, we absolutely go head to head with them. And, that challenges us to be better, both operationally, both from a product standpoint, product quality standpoint, client experiences standpoint. And then, the other thing is, quite honestly, I have to continue working hard to get the team the resources they need to take this thing to the next level, So it's, those are the things that we're rolling into 2021.
Outstanding. And I know exactly what radar you're talking about. And I'm really looking forward to some of that news being made for public consumption. So very exciting stuff for 2021. But also, Anand, really, we've been spending a lot of time in front of your partners, frankly, and they're gushing about you guys. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your, your partner ecosystem,
Sure.
Some of your customers, and why exactly can't they stop talking about you guys?
Well, I think one thing that has been the premise of the business is, collectively our community, and I speak about my community, or our community, if you will, as being the collection of, my team, the client community, the ecosystem as a whole, and a lot of the third-party partners, right? And so for those that are not familiar with NetSapiens, we sit at the core of, a lot of pretty complex platforms and networks, but they require other components in that network, for devices, third-party services, things like that. And those partner vendors play a big role in propagating what we're trying to do. And then collectively have to keep in mind that the markets that we play in are the non-tier one markets. And so our service provider community absolutely needs, as much, if you will, help, and there's power in numbers, right? So we all have to work together collectively to be able to compete against the biggest players in the market. And
clearly people are taking notice. So good on you, Anand. But Anand, let's talk a little bit about change. Obviously, a lot of technology advances, enhancements have been accelerated, expedited across the board, whether it be the platform, the UC&C collaboration providers, right down to the data center operators and everybody in between. So why don't you talk a little bit about how that change ultimately has impacted you, and how you see that change kind of pushing the entire industry over the course of the next 18 months.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So first off, not to go back to the article that I wrote, but there's a reason I wrote it, and I didn't do a video or whatnot like we're doing here, because you ask about personal change, and quite honestly, in the beginning of this whole thing, people are like, video fatigue and Zoom fatigue and things of that nature were said to be an issue, right? Conference call fatigue, and I thought, it'll be fine. But I think the reality is that there was absolutely a lot of people that I've spoken to professionally that are having to change the way they operate. And I think that is an adjustment that everybody's making professionally, figuring out how to operate in a virtual type situation, right? And so step one is actually just people adjusting and getting used to how to operate, and also I would say almost try to find the right balance, because you can absolutely, at least I feel, you can absolutely overdose on the video conference, and it's almost as if you end up having more meetings than you did before, because cooler, walking by the water cooler or just stopping by somebody's office doesn't happen. And so that segues into, okay, how can we, from a technology perspective, right? And it's not a problem that we can solve within the 18 months, but in the future, how do we still get that social interaction, right? And that balance without always having to have a meeting. And so that's where the integrations to, different, different tool sets, right? You might like being on video. I may not, but how can we still strike the appropriate conversation? But then at the same time, we need to bring in a third party, and that third party uses a completely different system, right? Somebody might use Zoom, somebody might use Microsoft, somebody might use NetSapiens. How do we bring all of that together? So I think that becomes a more important part. And internally, we were having those same discussions, right? Do we standardize on Google? Do we standardize on Slack? Do we, all of these types of discussions that are going on, which have just become to the forefront. And so I think integration and really understanding what the customer experience and the end user needs is going to become even that much more critical.
Yeah, Anand, you may have just answered my very next question, but I think it's still relevant. I'm going to ask it anyway. What role do platform providers, collaboration providers play in the future of the sector and ultimately meeting that end user demand, the butt in the seat demand? I think you got to some of that, but maybe you can, expand on that a bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think and again, just to expand on the same thing, I think it's really critical to understand what those, and again, this is something I've been saying for many, many years, and it's even more apparent now, is what are the clusters of use cases, right? And the clusters of the sub-markets that exist within the market, and what are the needs of those sub-markets? And that's where the combination of the platform provider and the channel, right, will I believe solve that problem, because the channel is going to be much closer, right? Whether you're an end user service provider or you're a partner running on a white label platform, they're the folks that are really going to understand what those use cases are, and they absolutely need to work very closely with platform providers like us, almost hand in hand, almost like we were in the front lines together to understand what those needs are. And I think that's very critical, I believe, for all platform providers to really engage with that channel.
Excellent. Anand, I'm going to go ahead and change my last question for you.
Okay.
That the last question as written is, let's talk about what's next for the future of our industry. I'm going to scrap that.
Okay.
Here's what I want. Why don't you tell me what you hope to see in the future for our industry?
That's an interesting one.
You're welcome.
My take, I think there's a lot of I would say competing forces, right, with where things are going. And while there's a lot of discussion and maybe anxiety and fear about the Zooms and the Microsofts and folks like that kind of owning the entire market, what I would like to see is a continued fragmentation and driving of end user choice. And what I mean by that is just like the internet kind of evolved, just like email evolved, there are different ways to use technology, and many, I would say, pockets of opportunity for a lot of providers. And so what I'm hoping for, and what I'm continuing to kind of evangelize, at least, from the NetSapiens perspective, and as we continue to grow, is this notion that, this is a incredibly, wide open market, and a lot of players can coexist. And so, conventional wisdom will say, oh, well, there'll be, upward consolidation, and, the market can't sustain itself, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not sure I completely believe that. And we're seeing it in our industry as a whole, but that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see, as many independent guys trying to stay independent, And what I mean by that is staying independent from the standpoint of really, differentiating themselves in this communications sector, if you will.
Do you think that drives innovation?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think again, that's at the core of what we do. It makes our work. I'm not going to lie. It makes our work that much more that much more difficult and challenging, because you can't obviously serve everybody and make everybody happy, right? I mean, that's a reality. But we certainly achieve to, we strive to do that, and the best way to do that is to create flexible platforms and flexible ways to do business, and then go from there.
I couldn't agree more, Anand. And it is always a pleasure speaking with you. You always bring that human layer to these conversations and to your own business. So I appreciate that. And thanks again for the time today. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dean.
You got it.